Welcome back to Homeopathy at Home with Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hey, Bri, great to see you.
Good to see you too, always.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's been a little while, so I'm happy to be back.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're going to talk about a couple really common issues in babies, colic and cradle cap specifically, and homeopathic remedies for them. We're going to talk about things that can contribute to that. And it sounds like we have some like good discussion points.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. These are all things I wish that I knew, right?
Right?
How often do we say that? I wish that I knew these things when my kids were little. You know, mine are teenagers, and I've got one that's going to be an adult this year, another one that is an adult, and so I'm past all that. But man, I wish I knew.
I also I feel the need to say for this one, this just came to mind. Because it's about babies and things we deal with, I remember with my first especially, but anytime you have a new baby and you're worried about these things, if you're here because you Google the podcast about it or for information, our goal is never to create anxiety or more for your to-do list or something that's going to make you feel overwhelming. So I know that you would say this too, like reject that anxiety, any of that overwhelm, and just take it in, learn something,
Mm.
and then take something away that feels manageable, but don't feel like you have to go change your whole life or you did everything wrong.
That's right. That's a really good point, because like I just said, my youngest at this point is 15 and my oldest is 26. And so it's been 15 years since I've had a baby. So I you over that much time, you forget how much really worry there is when you have babies, and or that there can be. So yeah, I love that. Just try not to do everything at the same time. I love what you said. That's perfect. Yeah, I need to remember what it feels like. I remember Googling in the middle of the night, what do I do?
And then you leave that, like I would leave my research sessions with like lists of 30 things. I'm going to go spend $400 at the natural food store. I have to set up all these specialist appointments. I have to cut every food out of my diet.
Right.
And that's just, it's such a slower process too. There's so much more involved in gut health and healing. And really the process of homeopathy has opened my eyes to steer away from all those quick fixes and just look ahead for long-term health and what can I do? Baby steps to like long-term manageable health.
Absolutely. So that is what we believe. Colic and cradle cap stem from gut health, which can absolutely be inherited from the parents. So both parents. So I've told my children, even my boys, you need to get your gut health straight before you start having children.
Right.
And and I say that with I say it loosely, because right now they don't care. And I didn't care either when I was their age. And and I didn't care even in my 20s before I got pregnant for the first time. So, but mamas or women, if you are planning to get pregnant, the best thing you can do for your baby is for you and your husband to get your gut health in as the best shape that you can. There's not perfection, just the best that you can. And you're going to set your baby up for better long-term health. So let's start with cradle cap. You want to?
Yeah, that sounds good.
What is cradle cap?
So cradle cap is an overproduction. Okay, so your sebaceous glands, let's start there. Cradle cap is produced by your sebaceous glands. So those are these little microscopic glands on your head that produce sebum, which is an oil that keeps your skin from drying out. So in babies, that's an overproduction. So it can dry out and still get flaky, but it's usually oily, or it can range. Anybody who's had a baby or seen a baby with cradle cap, I feel like the range is very wide.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very basic overview.
Yeah, it can be oily, dry, yellow, white, flaky, thick, crusty, brown. Yeah, and we're going to talk about a lot, if not all of those things. So some of the signs and symptoms of cradle cap are, like we said, the greasy scales, crusts of white, yellow, brown, like we just already said, and it's on the scalp of the baby's head, usually right on the top. It can come down, to the line of the forehead, and sometimes it can be on the forehead, I believe. And so it can be, again, scaly, dead skin. It can also be red. There can be redness to it. Sometimes the hair comes out with the crusts or the pieces, that that come off. So sometimes the hair comes out with it, and then of course the hair grows back. And so cradle cap can be on the face, eyelids, nose, ears, neck. And when we pick those scales off, so oftentimes people will put like an oil, like a coconut oil or some kind of oil on it, and kind of slop it off. Yeah. And they'll grow back. The scales usually just grow back. The scaling can be mild to severe, and sometimes it can crack and bleed. So then you run the risk of bacterial infection if there's open, sores on the head. So some remedies for cradle cap. Kali Sulph is, so remember, anything sulfur is yellow. So Kali Sulph is for the yellow scales on the head. And these scales can also be really sticky and oozy and yellow. So it's, that you can feel that it's sticky. And then Graphites has the scales again on the scalp, but also could be on the eyelids and behind the ears. And so when the scales are on the eyelids and behind the ears, then you're going to look at Graphites most likely. So there's a lot of scales, again, sticky fluid that comes out, and the hair gets stuck together. The scales might clear up when you wash them, but then they just grow right back. And in Graphites, the scalp might be cold to touch. So mama, when you touch the scalp, it feels cold. Graphites also helps to clear off dirty, crusty, scabby spots on the scalp in the cases of cradle cap. Do you want to talk about the next two?
Yeah, I will. The next one we have is Natmure. This one is, think water imbalance. You always have said that in our classes. So either overly watery or under, maybe dried out. So this one can be good for greasy or scaly cradle cap. And so this, traditionally, I would say cradle cap is overly greasy, oily, and scaly, but the scales are mostly white with Natmure. There's, again, might be some redness over the scalp. I would assume that's when you take them off, like if you were to scrape it off or whatever. Natmure can also be good if there are scabs on the scalp or the neck or armpits if it does spread. The next one we have is Thuja, and this is also for white scales. We use Thuja for a lot of things. I didn't realize that it was made from green twigs of the plant. That's so specific, like not the brown twigs.
It really is.
Like how it's so funny how they figured all that out. It's good for white scales. They might go down the neck or the ears. There might be sweat on the scalp that smells honey-like.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a couple of keynotes. You're gonna notice overlap, I think, because cradle cap looks so similar. So
yeah. So let's differentiate for just a minute. So Thuja is generally a good remedy for vaccinosis. So when you've been vaccine injured. So if there was no cradle cap before, a vaccine was introduced, then you might consider Thuja. Maybe if the cradle cap showed up after the vaccine, then I would consider Thuja.
You know what might also, and we talked about this a little before, that we call a lot of things cradle cap,
Mm,
dry skin on the head, but the true medical term means that it's usually an overproduction of sebum, which is a greasier, flakier, crusty stuff. So I'm wondering if even Thuja, it's a good fungal remedy too.
mm-hmm. Yep.
If maybe you're seeing this thing you're calling cradle cap, but it's actually some kind of fungal growth,
Yeah.
that might be something to consider too. Or I did have a mom once who said that it was diagnosed fungal. So maybe that's helpful to think about too.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to back up and just say, if I were going to use Thuja for a baby's cradle cap, I probably would use in the range of the 30C potency, maybe a 12C. Nat Mure, probably the same. For Nat Mure, because it's a cell salt, I probably would go 6X, 12X, maybe a 30C. Graphites, I might do a 30C, but probably would go for a 200 first. And Cali Sulph also, I would do probably a lower, like a 6X, maybe even a 6C, or possibly a 30C. So we're staying pretty low in these potencies right so far, with what we've read off.
And what do you think, depending on severity, I guess, would you start with like twice a week, every other day?
I would go daily. With all of these, I would start with once a day and maybe even go to twice a day, because their babies are generally very healthy. They need more stimulation, of their immune system. And we're talking about a physical problem. So I would expect to see it clear up pretty quickly. And when I say that, I don't mean days, although that could happen. But any of these remedies you choose, you're gonna plan to do 8 weeks at least, 8 to 12 weeks, and then reassess. Take pictures. Always take pictures of skin things, so that you can keep up. Our next remedy is Mezereum, and this has the leather-like crust. So what we're doing here with these remedies is differentiating. So telling you the differentials, what's different between them that would cause you to choose one over the other. And again, like Bri said, there's going to be overlap, because there's going to be several that are yellow or several that are thick and oily and whatever. So Mezereum, though, has the leather-like crust, and thick leather-like crust or scabs on the scalp. The hair might get glued together from the discharges from the scabs. The scabs on the scalp might look white, like chalk, and spread to the neck and the eyebrows. So it can go, down and down the front and down the back. And the hair, even from the eyebrows, might fall out. So,
man, see, this is the stuff that I'm like, if I was experiencing that with my baby, I would be really freaked out. If their hair is falling out,
Yeah.
So those are those moms that I'm like, it's okay. Things can be done. Your baby isn't doomed.
Yeah.
They can be fine.
Arsenicum album. I love Arsenicum album. This has the scales that extend to the ears and neck, and even to these scales are dry. So our Arsenicum album generally is an itchy remedy. So you might see the baby scratching however they can, whether that be, I don't know if they can actually, I don't expect to see babies scratching their head, but they might be rubbing their head on the pillow or on you, while you're holding them.
And restlessness. I mean, even a little baby just restless is Arsenicum album too. But if the baby is not just not content or comfortable.
Yeah, because, and so then you might, if you think that they're itchy, then I would definitely look at Arsenicum album. And so the scales are dry, rough, they look dirty. And again, the hair comes out along with the scabs and the scales. You want to do the next two?
Yeah, Dulcamara, is that how you pronounce that?
Yep.
I know people say different things, so I was always ask Melissa how she says them, and that's what I do. Okay, Dulcamara is also for thick brown crusts with maybe red borders. So I'm assuming you'll probably be able to see a little bit in between them. They also might spread over the forehead, the temples, and the chin. So those are some good differentials, actually. The borders might be red instead of under only, and then temples, forehead, temples, and chin.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, Petroleum is great for cradle cap with yellow-green crust. Petroleum is typically when there are also cracks, or if those things are, if the little scales are stuck and are hard to detach, or they bleed, and there may be red raw scalp. I feel like Petroleum is typically a really dry with a tendency to bleed and crack, or
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So your eczema.
Yeah.
If you get cracked fingers and toes in the winter because of ultra dryness, yeah, that's Petroleum.
So, and here's something else that just came to my mind to consider. If you have a baby who you're also noticing like cracks behind their ears, like you're thinking they have eczema or diaper rash a lot, in homeopathy, you're looking at all these as a big picture, where I think in allopathic medicine, you see cradle cap, eczema, asthma, or diaper. All of these things are separate, where Arsenicum, a lot of these remedies, actually, all of them, because they're homeopathic remedies, can treat all of those things with one or two remedies.
Right.
Don't have to treat them all separate.
Yes.
It'll likely go together anyway.
Yeah, that's good. Phosphorus is the cradle cap with prominent hair falling out and flakes on the scalp. So this is going to be more hair falling out than any of the other remedies, and a flaky scalp. So also the scalp might feel hot and sweaty. So remember, Graphites, the scalp felt cold. Right? Yes, cold to touch. Phosphorus, the scalp feels hot and sweaty.
And Thuja had sweat that smelled like honey.
Right? I did want to say that too. I meant to say that earlier when we were saying Thuja. Sometimes people don't understand what I'm saying because they've heard Thuja.
Yeah.
Thuja is what if that's how you've heard it, that's what we're saying. Not, so you don't think we're talking about a whole different remedy. And then as we started talking about sweat, I started thinking calc carb. Calc carb is a huge remedy for that, especially for the sweaty head on the baby. So calc carb 200C every 3 or 4 days, or even just once a week for the cradle cap that has thick scabs that bleed. And especially, they bleed when they're picked, they're thick, and these scabs can spread to the face. The scales might be yellow or white in color, and calc carb is profuse sweating. So there's sweating on the scalp and the neck, and calc carb smells sour generally. So the sweat or the baby's head smells sour, or if their breath smells sour, then you're going to consider calc carb.
Okay, I do have a question in general, because typically with when we're talking immune system support or gut health, we often say to take calc carb anyway. Would that be a situation where if you're noticing severe cradle cap or colic, which we'll get into, or a few different things going on with your baby, you would do calc carb regularly, like with an older child, and a remedy with it?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, calc carb, I believe, goes with probably just about any remedy, as a base,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. Hmm.
So it does have some specific keynotes for cradle cap,
Yeah,
but you might, even if the cradle cap doesn't look like that, maybe consider doing it alongside another remedy
right.
anyway.
So
Um,
we were talking about earlier before we got on here, we were talking about gut health and how poor gut health can contribute to, and we did talk about that as we started to with mom and daddy, can contribute to colic and cradle cap. And so I did just want to touch on a couple of bowel nosodes that you might consider.
yeah.
So let me just say, Anthony Bickley writes great bowel nosode books. And so this is Bowel Nosodes, a practice handbook. He writes other bowel nosode books, but the one that I'm looking in right now by Anthony Bickley is the Bowel Nosodes, a practice handbook. And so if I look at the skin chapter, we see cracked. And so we talked about how some of these cradle cap pictures can be cracked, and then it gives you some specific body parts that might be cracked, but also just under cracked skin, there's bacillus number 7, disco, Morgan Bach, Morgan Gartner, Morgan Pure, and Psychotic Co. We talked about discharges. So discharges that are sticky are disco. What I'm saying is DYS-CO, disco. And remember that these are all transcribed on my blog, so you can go and see the names of the remedies that I'm saying. Then it talks about the colors. So yellow, the yellow cradle cap is going to be Morgan Pure, Psychotic Co, Disco, Morgan Pure. Oh, again, I said that already. Why is that on there twice? That's weird. Oh, sorry, because I went down to dry. I skipped. The next rubric is dry. So dry skin, the dry cradle cap would be Disco, Morgan Pure, Psychotic Co. And so I'm not saying that you would jump straight to a bowel nosode, but you could consider it in your research and read these remedies and see if they fit the baby's gut health and the baby's skin really well. So wanted to just, cracked is Disco, Morgan Pure, and Psychotic Co. Crusty is Disco, Morgan Bach, Morgan Gartner, and Morgan Pure. We have dry again. We have eczema, which I'm not going to get into eczema, but it's there in this book if you wanted to look at it. Hot, we talked about hot, that it might feel hot, Morgan Pure. Itchy, Morgan Pure, Proteus, and Psychotic Co. Moist, Morgan Bach, Morgan Gartner, Morgan Pure. So I'm really just giving you a quick list to really want to spark your interest in the bowel nosodes and go do some more research. One last one, then here's scaly. Bacillus number 7, Disco, Morgan Gartner, Morgan Pure, and Psychotic Co.
You chopped up a little bit right at that last remedy.
Okay. Scaly, yep. Bacillus 7, Disco, Morgan Bach, Morgan Gartner, Morgan Pure, and Psychotic Co. So this is a great book with that also has a Materia Medica in it. So you see, I have my Materia Medica part marked so that I could turn straight to the Materia Medica of the bowel nosodes and read them.
That's very cool.
And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 bowel nosodes in here. So that might be something interesting to you, especially.
That book?
Say that again.
What was the title of that book?
Bowel Nosodes, a practice handbook by Anthony Bickley.
Okay. And he's a homeopath?
Let's see.
Or something? I
He's
mean,
thought
he
of
obviously knows a lot about bowel
yeah,
those. I don't
he
know why he
doesn't
would.
he doesn't have any letters behind his name. So I
Okay.
actually don't know what he is. And even in the pages of the book, like in the beginning, well, okay, so he does have an introduction here that just says he's been working with bowel nosos for more than 30 years and has developed enormous respect for their healing properties. In that time, this book is designed to be a practice one-stop resource for everything to do with these homeopathic remedies. I'm assuming he's a homeopath. But it sounds like he's been doing bowel nosos for a long time. So he's got a lot of practice, a lot of experience is what I'm trying to say. So also with gut health, or poor gut health, a baby can have colic. So another thing that can go along with poor gut health is colic in a baby.
Mhm.
So Bri, what is colic?
Okay.
You're on the spot.
I actually did look up. Well, I know colic is behavior really, or indigestion, but there are several things that could be the causes of colic. So obviously there are instances where your baby has an allergy and you're going to notice those kinds of symptoms in a baby if there's allergies. It might sometimes be overfeeding or underfeeding. It can be accompanied with tongue ties, a poor latch. Um, it could really be affected by their digestive system, so an imbalance of bacteria. So there are a lot of contributing factors. So before you jump to like allergies and all those things, maybe, I mean, look at their latch is where I would start. So there's a lot of things that can contribute. I won't get into all of those things, but typically colic is very painful.
Mm.
The true definition, this is crazy, on Mayo Clinic says colic is defined as crying for 3 or more hours a day, 3 or more days a week, or for 3 or more weeks.
Yeah.
That's extreme.
Yeah, it is extreme. And that definition is something that has been around for a long time. And so, they had to have, what is the word I'm looking for? Like a guideline of, is this colic or is this just a fussy baby? Because there's a difference.
Right.
Colic is extreme. It is extreme. The baby is screaming, the baby's in pain.
So
It's a
let's
lot.
clarify like what we're talking about. I don't like, none of my babies have ever been like that. I feel like if a baby is that upset, that's a bigger problem than just a gut imbalance. That's likely an allergy or something. At least like with my kids, it would be weird for me if my baby is screaming, even the type of cry, the painful cry, the way they were affected. That was enough for me to give remedies to help support like just gas.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe are we talking like true colic where your baby's been really upset?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're
We're not
talking
talking
true
just
colic.
little gassy
Mm.
baby here.
This is not just a fussy, gassy baby, although these remedies can definitely help a fussy, gassy baby.
I totally
Yeah.
used them. So, and they were great.
Yeah, I would love to hear your experience because it has been kind of recent.
Yeah. Oh my word. It was seriously like, so I have 3 sons. All of them were tongue tied and different, very varying degrees and nursed all very differently, but all of them were gassy. And I knew it was because of their latch. And I had a pretty healthy gut. Didn't have antibiotics. And my first was vaccinated partially. My others were not. So there were not a lot of outside factors, no allergies, cutting dairy for my first 2. I did all the things, cut dairy, tried, a trillion things. I used gas drops, even the homeopathic ones. But every 15 minutes, I'd be giving these things and there was no relief. So finally, with my third, I was already taking your courses and working with you. And I did Nux Vomica 200 mixed with Colocynthis 200. I'm talking like 30 seconds after giving that remedy, for that combo. It was like a miracle. I'm not even exaggerating. It would be within 1 minute every single time. And then I got to the point where I'm on really tough days, I just give it when it was a regular daily thing. I'd go ahead and give it twice a day for a couple weeks at a time and a couple times throughout the day as needed. But what I noticed the biggest difference is he would calm down, but he would pass gas. Like it would come out almost where it wasn't painful and just stuck there. And I never remember that using gas drops or gripe water. I didn't really use much gripe water ever.
I did.
Well, I mean, I think most people do because it's better than, they say that it's in the natural aisle.
I don't know if it did anything, but that is what I used.
I feel like it does nothing for a really, truly gassy or colicky baby. It doesn't, other than make you feel like you're doing something. So anyway, that was my experience. I used it. I seriously recommend it to every mom I know. I know the protocol we're going to talk about today and that a lot of people use is 30. Those remedies in a 30, which would work well, I'm sure. I just had 200, so that's what I used.
Yep. Yeah. So Nux Vomica 30C mixed with Colocynthis 30C every 15 minutes for severe pain in the belly, especially when it's better from pressure. A lot of these mamas, they've got the baby up on the shoulder because it puts pressure here, or they've got them laying across their lap because that pressure.
The bicycles.
Oh yeah, all the pressure. So when it's better from pressure, then this combination is great. And like Bri said, if you have to order and you don't have anything on hand, then order the 30s. And then if you see a little bit of relief, but you have to give it very often, then you're just playing with it and you need to go up to a 200 and see if you can make it, give them some more relief for a longer amount of time. If the baby is no better within several days of, let's say you start with 30C in those two, and you do that for several days and the baby's no better, then you try the 200C, the baby's no better. Then I would try phos 6X or 3C or 6C. And it's not that 6X equals 3C or 6C. It's just in that those are some of the potencies that I would try. And you could do that before each feeding, whether it be at the breast or the bottle before a feeding, then that would be the next thing. If still no better, in about a week, then I would try Semisafuga 6C or 200C in the same fashion as above.
The same fashion, meaning every 15 minutes or before eating?
Good question. Every 15 minutes in severe pain. So let's say this too. Let's add on to the Nux Vomica and Colocynthis and the Semisafuga. Every 15 minutes, of course, you're not going to do that for hours on end. You're going to, if the baby's screaming and it's severe, then you can do every 15 minutes for an hour. But then at that point, you really need to back off and wait and give the remedy time to act. So every 15 minutes for an hour, fine, but then spread out to every, 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours if you can, or as needed.
Yeah. So I really would love to hear people's experiences. I wish there was like this forum I could hear from people, because I really felt like it worked. There were only a couple times where I gave it every 15 minutes. Otherwise, like 1 or 2 doses would work for a few hours. Sometimes I had to do it more often for sure. But I just was blown away. Yeah. It was seriously a miracle and saved my life with a little baby. That was the hardest part of my babies. They all were gassy. So if you notice that, I would also suggest not homeopathy, but a good chiropractor.
Yes.
I know if you don't regularly go, I used to be the same way. I didn't grow up going to one, and that freaked me out, like seeing people get their necks cracked like that. I remember being so afraid of chiropractors. And now I see there's such a variety of chiropractors.
Yeah.
Most of the ones I've gone to don't just do that. They can be much more gentle. Right now we see a nervous system focus. She's very gentle, and
Mhm.
you can find ones that are certified in working with babies. So
Yeah.
they're so gentle. They're not cracking any baby bones.
I love chiropractic care. Very, very good point.
They can
Mm.
help with latch,
Mm.
loosening things, and their esophagus. Like, they do all kinds of stuff that can help with
Mhm.
gassiness. So
Absolutely.
I would recommend that for sure.
Yeah. I want to also just point out to especially those students of mine who really like to dig deep and learn. If you wanted to find colic in your repertory and dig even deeper, it's in the clinical generals. Okay, so first of all, I'm in Dr. Murphy's meta repertory. So in Dr. Murphy's meta repertory, it's in the clinical generals section. So even if you have an older version, if you have the third edition, it's probably still going to be in the clinical generals section. And if you're in the meta, it's on page 2161, and you see colic pain, and then under that you see colic pain infants.
Mm.
And then in parentheses, it says see intestines chapter. So we could turn over to the intestines chapter. So then you see under there, you see in all bold all caps, Chamomilla. I was going to mention that some parents have tried Chamomilla
Yeah.
because Chamomilla is great for pain and for that mad screaming baby. So often I'll ask when a baby is crying and whether it's teething or gas or whatever the problem is, I'll ask the mom, is the baby mad and screaming or pitiful, like a pitiful, whimpery, crying, whiny, you can tell the difference is the mom. So Chamomilla is your angry, that baby is mad. And then we've got Colocynthis, which we already talked about. You see Mag Phos. Mag Phos is bold in all caps. So you might read Mag Phos and see, now Mag Phos is a cell salt, so you could use it. It doesn't matter that it's a cell salt as far as potency, but I would probably start with a 30 or maybe even 200. That's just been my experience with Mag Phos. 6X is good for some people sometimes. I love Mag Phos 200 for constipation. So what I've helped people with is they are constipated and they're trying to go, they have the urge and they just can't, and they take Mag Phos, and within a minute or two they're starting to have a bowel movement. So that's pretty amazing. Same thing with Nux Vomica. Nux Vomica is great for constipation and stomach pain. So even just generalized belly aches in children, and so we're talking about, stomach pain in a baby, Nux Vomica. And then you see the sub rubrics under there, if the baby is drawing their legs up, Chamomilla Colocynthis. If they are, goodness, look at that. So grief after taking breast milk of a mother who suffers from grief, Ignatia.
Are you on now intestines?
Nope, I'm still under colic.
Oh, okay. It says the same thing under intestines. I just noticed that too.
Okay.
So like the baby can take grief, and that we were talking about that too. The link between mom and baby postpartum is it's huge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. An angry mother who is breastfeeding her baby, or it might not even be breastfeeding the baby, but just an angry mom, that those feelings transferring, or the baby feels that. And then if the baby's colicky, then you might consider Kelp Phos, Chamomilla, Staphysagria. So those are some good places to look if you want. Listen, I would start with the Nux Vomica Colocynthis protocol that we gave you first. I would go, if that's not working, and these are not Banerjee protocols. I think, and I feel safe to say, these are my protocols.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are from you. They might also be a Banerjee protocol, but you had this before, I think, in your notes prior to when we did class.
Yeah. So, huh. I honestly, I don't know. So what I feel like is that most homeopaths would say Nux Vomica or Colocynthis. I believe that after some experience with moms, one by itself wasn't working well, so I started combining them and saw something different. And then I personally love nat phos. Anybody who's ever been in a class of mine, especially the cell salts class, knows how much I love nat phos. And so I think that's why I decided, okay, if this combo doesn't work, go to nat phos next. So that's Melissa's second line protocol. and then I believe, Bri, you probably helped me find Semisafuga because of your experience.
Yeah. I use that actually for myself sometimes too,
Mhm.
for any cramping pain, Simisafuga or Colocynthis.
Yeah.
So,
So if oh, I wanted to say, let's say this last thing before we get off of here, that when you're dosing a baby, most people, the biggest question is, how many pills do I give? Because it's just a baby. It doesn't matter if the baby was just born or the person is 118 years old. You're going to use the number of pills that's stated on the bottle is a dose. So then how do you put pills in a baby's mouth? If you have the tiny little ones, you can put them in there and they dissolve so quickly. All the saliva in the baby's mouth, they're definitely not going to choke. If you want to dissolve them in water, dissolve them in pure water, purified water. I use my Berkey filter. And then store it in the refrigerator. It's good in the refrigerator for 1 month. Label it with what's in there and when you made it. And then about a half a teaspoon is a dose. You don't have to measure that exactly.
I sorry, for my newborns, I put it in breast milk.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yep.
And then I mean, I probably used maybe a quarter to a half a teaspoon, and
Absolutely.
it worked. So just keep that in mind. Be flexible. You don't have to like get
Yeah.
it perfect, but try some of those things.
Perfect. Wonderful. That's so
Thank you.
good.
This was great.
Yeah, this was great. So I hope you all really got some great information about colic and cradle cap here and babies and how to, even just how to dose babies. And if you need more help, if you need acute help, so maybe your baby is very fussy or gassy, you can go to my website and schedule an acute, not schedule, but just fill out the form for an acute consult. And or maybe your baby has chronic digestive issues, chronic colic, chronic cradle cap, schedule a chronic consult. And so you start with your free 15-minute phone call, and we'll be happy to help get that baby's gut health back in order if that's the problem, and prevent future chronic issues. So thank you for being with me, Bri, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next time.